FA really pushing now for stronger action against blatant racism on social media towards black footballers. I can't believe we're even having this conversation. I can't believe this disgusting abuse is still going on with the scale that it's going on. What is the answer?
Well, there is an answer, and the answer is for the social media companies to take action to prevent terms of a racist nature even appearing on their platforms. Now, if I give you an example, if I were to post Premier League footage on social media, it would be removed within, what, half an hour, an hour. If someone were to post a racist term on social media, even if the person to whom that term had been sent had taken advantage of the social media platforms' reporting mechanisms, that term would still be online 2-3 days later. And that's a big reason why footballers have little faith when people suggest that
and Darren,
firms might be punished
financially. I'm going to ask you, Darren, you're a high-profile black football writer, and you have been at the forefront of your game and journalism for a long time. Do you get this abuse? Do you get racially abused on social media?
Well, I take advantage of the filters that are available. So a lot of the stuff that may well be directed at me, I tend not to see. So from my point of view, it isn't as much of an issue for me. When I first went onto social media, I did get some. And what I would do, I would sort of show other people, I'd retweet it, and those people would be shamed to such an extent that they would delete their accounts. But as I said this last week, Piers, Susanna, a lot of the time we focus on the abuse that's directed at higher profile footballers. I know earlier in the show you were talking about Gemma Collins and the abuse that she had. But often it's ordinary people who don't have that profile, who don't have the size of followers to get you guys to fight on their behalf. Yeah. It's ordinary people who are affected by this.
I think
and as you started off by saying, very quickly, you started off by saying, we're in 2021 talking about young black men going to work and having to brace themselves for racist abuse. If you strip it down, that's what we're talking about.
Yes. I think you make such a good point about the fact that the social media companies have no excuse for not acting swiftly, because if there is a commercial imperative there, as you say, if you posted something with a rights issue for which you haven't paid, Premier League football clips, for instance, they will act immediately. But it goes to show that because there is no commercial imperative for them, they don't act on something which has devastating personal, psychological, emotional consequences.
Here's the point, Darren. I used to run the Mirror, as you know, probably have the mental scars to go with it. But you couldn't run this kind of stuff in a newspaper because of the way that newspapers are regulated. We couldn't broadcast this kind of filth on Good Morning Britain because of the way we're regulated in television. There is zero regulation other than self-regulation for these social media companies, yet they're the most powerful platforms in the world right now. And I think the only answer, honestly, with the trolls, if the social media companies are not going to take enough action quickly enough, and they should, but if they don't, you've got to start doing what they've started doing in Australia. You now get fined large sums of money if you do this kind of thing in Australia.
Yeah, but the social media companies need to be fined. Because as you've identified, unless there is a commercial or financial consequence for the social media companies, they are not taking action.
No, that's true. But I would also say, now this is what Darren thinks, if you took a dozen of these racist trolls on Twitter and you find them, I don't know, I said 100 grand, let's make it, 20,000, right? 20,000 quid. To a lot of these trolls would be so punitive, I think it would be a short, sharp shock where actually you could clean a lot of this stuff up overnight.
Well, we saw last week the ex-England and Arsenal legend, Ian Wright. He expected some kind of criminal conviction for the person who had sent him 20 offensive messages, and there was nothing. What we've seen in the past is high-profile footballers actually high-profile celebrities go after individuals legally because they felt that it may well have been a sledgehammer to crack a nut. But really what you do need to do is send a message out to people. But what happens is that it reaches the courts, and all too often you get a judge who wants to show leniency to someone and say, well, look, you're a young man, you've got your whole life ahead of you, I'm going to be a bit lenient on you on this occasion. and round we go. And I think until we have, I do agree, a situation where an individual footballer goes after somebody and makes sure that they do get a criminal conviction and does send out that message, I think we will continue to have this conversation.
I totally agree. And the Ian Wright thing made me puke, frankly. You've got this young scumbag just spewing the most disgusting racist abuse at him. He goes to court and he gets let off, effectively let off. There's no proper holding to account. And Ian Wright, he posted a very sad response to it, basically saying at the end, I'm just tired, tired. And that must be how so many black footballers and high-profile black people in this country must feel. It's exhausting,
Darren,
having to fight this battle with no help.
I don't think the individuals should have to cope with it. I don't think they're the ones who should have to take the battle on. I mean, even someone with the stature and courage of Ian Wright, who takes it on, doesn't get the justice that he deserves. This should be, the onus should be on the social media companies. They're the ones who should do the fighting, and they're the ones who should take the hit, in my opinion.
Two quick points on that. I mean, last Wednesday evening, a Southampton footballer, Alex Jankovic, was sent off after 2 minutes. 19 years of age, he was sent racist abuse immediately afterwards on social media. And on Saturday night, Axel Tuanzebe, the Manchester United footballer, came on 2 minutes from the end of the game, made a mistake. On social media, there was so much racist abuse that his representatives had to limit comments on his account. The social media companies, Instagram last valued 2 years ago at $100 billion by Bloomberg. So I'm looking at the idea that you could find them. And I'm thinking, what impact really would it make on them?
Yeah.
I'm not so sure.
No, I agree. Darren, great to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. We appreciate you joining us. Andrew, this is such a minefield, this. But it's so disheartening that even after the events of the last 8 months, with the George Floyd killing, the Black Lives Matter protests that erupted all around the world, but people sickened by what they'd seen, that even now we're still getting black footballers horribly abused on social media.
It's disgusting and unacceptable. And the Premier, you know I don't follow football, but what I often hear about football is how it's scarred by this appalling racism. The Premier League is meant to be one of the finest, most famous, glamorous, successful Premier Leagues in the world, and yet it's got this terrible problem. And what disturbs me, Piers, as a kid, I used to go to football with my dad. We used to go and watch Swindon Town down there in the depths of the old Division 3. And even then, if a black player came on the pitch, banana skins were thrown on the pitch, which was astonishing to a young teenage boy like me. Now, I know we don't do that anymore, but because they're much more cowardly in the way they deliver their abuse, they do it through the prism of social media. And Susanna's right. Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg, those sort of people have a huge responsibility, and they duck it all the time because they're making so much money. They couldn't care less. They couldn't care less about Ian Wright's racist abuse. That's the only conclusion you can draw.
Yeah, you know, I was quite shocked, Kevin. I announced a new series of my Life Stories show, and the first guest is Gemma Collins, a very divisive, polarising reality TV queen, and you either love her or hate her. She has millions of followers and millions of people who don't like her. But when I announced this yesterday, I was really shocked. And it doesn't take a lot. It takes a lot to shock me now, frankly, with trolling, because I get a lot of it myself. But the overt, horrible abuse that spilled out towards her from people on Twitter, including people directly wishing her dead, I just thought was utterly shocking. And also, ironically,
Jackie Weaver talking just a moment ago.
Jackie Weaver talked about it. We saw it. Marcus Rashford getting it last week. We saw Captain Tom, as he was dying, getting trolled on social media. And there's no limit to this now. There's no barrier to any of this. It's the Wild West on social media with no accountability.
Yeah, well, it's the Wild West and it needs taming. I saw some of that stuff about Gemma Collins, and I'm not Gemma Collins' biggest fan, but it made me think, whoa, this has got to stop. This is just vile. If you said that to her in the street or shouted at her in the street, you could be arrested for a public order of defence. Why should you be able to get away with it online? I think two things. One, the Instagram, Facebooks, Twitters, they're not platforms, they're publishers. They're allowing this to be published. You said you couldn't get away with this in a newspaper. You couldn't get away with it in a newspaper because you would be taken to court. So one, they've got to be held accountable as publishers, not just platforms. And secondly, and this is going to happen, why give the cloak and protection of an anonymity to racists or homophobes, transphobes, people who are absolutely violent? I can see there are issues around in, say, Russia, if Putin wants to unmask Alexei Navalny's supporters. But in Britain, I cannot see why you have to prove who you are when you register for an account.
Totally agree. Make people give their real names, their real pictures, and their employers. That would soon stop a lot of this nonsense.